Hey, welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness Wednesday. Every Wednesday we have a new episode, and today is episode 125, How You Must being in all caps, express your art. And what do I mean by art? Well, art comes in many, many forms. Creativity is what I'm talking about, and just the freedom to express what it is we are gifted in, whatever it is, in all its unique flavors. Your art is your gift to the world. It's what you need for your spirituality to quote unquote work. So we've got Chelan Harkin today. She is an up and coming poet who has just recently published a really beautiful work called Susceptible to Light. So we're going to talk today about moving in through things like faith transitions and going into the depths of what she calls torrential inspiration, in a good way, torrential inspiration around like what it is you're meant to express here on this planet. She grew up in the Baha'i faith, and she's going to share her journey around that. But we got really honest around how you can forge this really beautiful, wholehearted relationship to spirit through expanding your natural gifts. Chelan was actually a hypnotherapist, a practicing hypnotherapist for over 10 years, and now has moved into the work of a full-time poet. But she's also been the recipient of over, I think she said, 100 different hypnotherapy sessions. So she's been able to do a lot of the shadow work we talk about in this podcast, a lot of diving deep, and particularly her relationship to the creator and how she manifests creation through her being. Remember, you can find us on the Women Seeking Wholeness Facebook group. Ask to join that. Also on Cherie Burton Instagram. We dive deep now every single day, asking some thought-provoking things and generating discussion on both of those platforms based on each week's episode. So if you want to go dive a little deeper and get into some of the meat around what we're really discussing on these episodes, join us there on social media.
Got it.
Chelan, here we are, Cherie and Chelan. Like we were just laughing about our names. Like it's really hard to get it right. Are you always correcting people your whole life?
Always, almost daily. Yep.
Well, names are powerful. Stories are powerful. Origin stories in particular are powerful, and you have a fascinating one. This is one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on, is to share that your faith journey really is kind of where I think it's landing first to start with. Can you share with us how your experience of growing up in the faith you did, and how this is two parts, but like how it kind of suppressed your natural divine feminine instincts to the point where you are doing what you're doing now?
Oh, it's such a good question. I really want conversations along this theme to be more commonplace, because I think faith, it's such an intimate thing. And that when we can bring forth these parts of ourselves that are really close to our heart, there's a lot of room for healing and growth and self-understanding and transformation. So I also just kind of want to preface anything I say with that this is actually like, it's quite new for me, not brand new, but it's still in the new early stages of my journey of really being like ready and excited actually to talk about this theme. So okay. So I grew up in the Baha'i faith, and many have never heard of the Baha'i faith. It's spelled
Bahai, just FYI, because I had to ask you how to spell it before.
Right. Yeah. So I think, I'm looking forward to having more conversations with people who grew up in minority faiths and just understanding other people's experience, because that can just shed so much light and open our own. But not having done too much of that, except with other Baha'is, I think there are interesting challenges in growing up in a minority group of any kind. And I grew up in a small town. Most of my friends were either in families that had no spiritual belief or practice, or were kind of vaguely Christian. And so I'll say actually the trickiest part in my journey with the Baha'i faith has been that it's been so mixed because I have genuine and true love for many elements that I have absorbed, and for many things that I really appreciate. Many things about the way I've been shaped by the Baha'i faith. And then it's been ambiguous because there are other things that have been really complicated and hard, and elements of my voice and power and kind of inner knowing that I felt cut off from.
Sure.
So anyway, so that's part, it's a messy and interesting journey. Yeah, so I'll just say a little bit because probably no one, or few listeners have been exposed to the Baha'i faith, that kind of the foundational belief is that all religions come from the same God. And there's this concept, so that really there is, in essence, only one ever unfolding faith, and that the purpose of religion is to help move humanity forward, both spiritually and socially, to kind of more wider, more unified and harmonious groupings. And so Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, the intention of the Baha'i faith is to create a system in which the whole world can function in harmony.
So is it hierarchical in nature? Is there like one main leader, and then they kind of all grab, the teachings revolve around what that leader's philosophies are? Or
good question. Do you mean kind of like, so the Baha'u'llah was the founder, kind of like Christ is the founder of Christianity and Muhammad is the founder of Islam. So yes, in that way, like there's a book and all of that and teachings from Baha'u'llah. But then currently, so there's no clergy in the Baha'i faith. So that's kind of a different model. And there are groups called spiritual assemblies that are elected to guide communities, and those people aren't paid or anything like that. So it's kind of it's not a position of power. It's really a position of service. So that's kind of a brief answer there. Yeah.
From what you've shared with me before, the faith's central philosophy, if you will, or theology is based around oneness.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's beautiful. So I'm thinking, why is that? Why would that suppress you? Like,
right. Absolutely. That's a really good question. So
because most religions aren't about that. Like most religions are about, like I was saying, more of a hierarchical, or you could say that there's leaders and then there's the lay clergy, right?
Right.
So if I'm hearing someone talk about a religion where there's oneness, I'm like, oh, that's really cool. So yeah.
So where does it get complicated?
Where does it go wrong?
Great question. Yeah. And I also want to say, this is just representative of my own personal journey and experience, of course. And it's also representative of a Baha'i living in a Western culture with more left brain, Western interpretations of it all. So I think for me, my struggle is that was that because it doesn't feel like a struggle anymore, was that I think my experience was that the community is in a process of its own evolution and understanding of these concepts. And also the community, because the Baha'i faith is so young, a lot of people bring in religious conditioning from other more traditional and just more traditional ways of thinking, maybe, or
in terms of like male patriarchy, or what do you mean by that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. What do I mean by that?
Well, I'm just curious about what what would get carried over that felt not aligned for you.
Well, I guess kind of like a attachment to the law or the word rather than like the spirit or the inner promptings and the inner knowing, and that kind of more mystical process of like really embodied, wholehearted, honest spiritual connection. Does that make sense? And so I felt like there was a lot of shortcutting that happened in the Baha'i faith. So like this principle of oneness and unity would kind of shortcut and love, like, being like loving people, but then, you know, like some of the humanness and the human struggle and the ego and how to work with that, and the very real kind of, you know, messy inner journey stuff was kind of swept under and
so maybe like spiritual bypassing.
Yeah,
hey,
boom.
Hey, here's this issue.
Yeah. Yes, a lot of spiritual. So then, personally, I felt very fragmented in that space. So I didn't know how to work with my own struggles, or how to be upfront or truthful or open. And then that in itself, learning how to be more whole, really, as a human being, and more upfront about my struggles, has been really my primary spiritual path, actually, and in moving through that. And so I think, yeah, it's mostly that sort of bypassing element and the self-fragmenting.
You'd mentioned to me before that, you know, sometimes when there's a really focused spiritual community or path that a family, you know, you're born into, right? And you kind of are along for the ride, right? Like, this is what everyone believes. This is what everyone does. Or I'm really special because I have this thing that not everyone else has. Like, there's some programming around that, that I hear from a lot of, no matter what the religion or path is, like whatever your family did or didn't do or whatever is just your norm.
Yes.
And then you start to, go out a little in the world, or you start to hear other people's experiences, and you're like, I thought that was just exclusive to what my faith taught. And so that's why I love the oneness concept, because it so encapsulates all of the experiences of other faith. I take more of an omnis view. My religious heritage is Mormonism, and I honor it. There's some beautiful teachings, exactly what you're saying about the Baha'i faith. And I still consider myself a member, and I live right here in Utah, and I'm surrounded by these beautiful people that are my culture and heritage.
Yes.
But what I've done and given myself permission to do is just extrapolate what serves there and what doesn't land in my body. Exactly what you're saying. Like, you know, there just isn't a lot of space for things to have this embodied, you know, feminine being in this space where there's all this tradition and all these teachings, to be able to have the emancipation, if you will, to emancipate myself and just say, this serves, this doesn't. So I take more of, like, I guess, an omnis view or a universalist view, which isn't even a religion or a path at all. It's just, I'm Cherie.
Yes.
I have studied many things, many ways. If you go to my website, I'm something of a Christian yogi, Jewish mystic, something or other, right? Yeah. I don't want to pigeonhole into one thing, but I think I lead with Christianity. I lead with that because that's where my heart and heritage is. As I'm reading your poetry book, I'm like, there's so much spirituality here. There's a lot of talk of God. There's some themes that we're going to get into that I can tell a little bit of what your transition journey was like just through reading your poetry.
Nice. Yeah.
So you sat in these spaces, you noticed there was just some dissonance with some things. What was the bridge that brought you to sort of that freeing, like, was it your poetry that was sort of the impetus to bring you over into kind of going inside yourself and really honoring what you were feeling? Or what brought you sort of into the landing place of having that freedom?
What a great question. Well, I think I've always had something of a strong inner voice, and I'm just drawn to, I don't know, the word mystical can almost make it sound like I'm setting myself apart, or I don't have that kind of quality, and I don't mean it at all.
I know what you mean. I have a hard time proclaiming it too. I'm like, I think I'm a Mormon mystic. I'm like, what is that? Does that mean
awesome,
I have this direct? Yeah, no.
Yeah, I like that. I like that juxtaposition a lot, though, Mormon mystic, because it's a surprising one. But
people just don't know what to do with it. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah, right. And that's why it's so excellent. But so I've always had, for me, what I mean by mystic is really, it's just kind of opening the heart to the wisdom and flow of God, and trying to trust that and having some kind of connection with that. And I've always had that in a very strong way, which means it took extra energy to repress that, which was profoundly uncomfortable and led to incredible suffering. So that was one piece of the journey, was just really moving through suffering, which really at the root of my suffering was just, being disconnected from my truth and being unwilling or disempowered to speak my truth, or not feeling safe enough, like my belonging would be at risk if I were to really just come out with it, Yeah. So really resurrecting my truth and voice. And then one other just mini cool story was I was actually on Baha'i pilgrimage in Israel, and we were visiting Baha'u'llah's prison cell. And I was really interested in that spot for some reason, most drawn to it. And we went into this prison cell, and I was in this group of people that were like marathon prayers. Like we would go to these places and have time to like say prayers or whatever. And I really wanted to be alone in some places, but there was just no having it, because these people would just go for it for a long time. Anyway, but I sat down in this cell and I closed my eyes, and it really felt like I had just closed my eyes for a few seconds. And I must have gone into some very deep, like trance space, because I opened my eyes. Everyone had left the prison and the door was closed. So I was alone in this prison cell. And this is first and I've only had a few experiences, anything remotely like this, but I just kind of heard a voice that wasn't really with my ears, but it was absolutely an experience of receiving another person communicating with me. And it was Baha'u'llah. And he said to me at a very deep soul level, he said, "Let us dance." And what was communicated to me, and that was like, it was this incredible permission to have a dynamic and living and honest and wholehearted relationship with spirit and with my journey. So that was a really profound moment, and that really kind of stirred up my soul. Yeah.
It's so interesting that the universe and the divine will meet you where you're at. What you had was a Baha'i background.
Yes.
You went on this pilgrimage, whatever it was, and you sat in the space, and some level of your soul was open to receive what you needed to dance, whatever that message was.
Yes.
I think we can get so locked into, that means the Baha'i faith is the real, true, only religion because you have this mystical experience.
No.
I know. I'm just saying the lines and the dots we connect to truth. I've had a lot of, people have profound mystical experiences, even when they were like in a cult or they were in an abusive relationship or whatever. It's the universe and the divine will meet you exactly where you are in your own construct, in your own background and lived experience to give you the message you need so you'll hear it.
How beautiful is that? That sounds right on. Yep.
Yeah. So one thing that you and I are aligned on, just based on the conversations we had before, is that there isn't a lot of emotional health education in both our families of origin, just because of where the consciousness was at, where it was at. Yeah. And then sometimes in some of these more focused communities, we'll just say it could be a religion, it could be any kind of a spiritual gathering of people where they start to align with philosophies and try to extrapolate. There's not a lot of emotional anchoring, let's just say. What was your experience with that? And was that one of the reasons that you felt like, okay, maybe I need to, go expand my territory a little bit?
That's a great way of putting it. Expand my territory. So particularly, do you mean in the Baha'i community or
just that bridge over to finding your own voice?
Great question. So I've written a lot about this, about the importance of spirituality being something that's really comprehensive, in that I think for it to really work and be a source of health, that it needs to really include a way of relating to it that supports the emotional and the psychological. And that if it doesn't, I think it can be a way of relating to it in a fragmented way. And I really believe health comes from moving toward wholeness. So yeah, I think there's I was talking with my therapist about this, about how just ignoring the shadow, religious groups, the spiritual groups, kind of ignoring the shadow. And I don't mean the shadow by ignoring the bad things, but just ignoring the real things, any doubt, being able to really explore doubt, or, really being able to say, like, even if the religions talks at length about how beautiful life after death is, like really being able to process fear about that, I think would be so helpful. Or, just all of those pieces. Yeah. So there wasn't space for that. And it's interesting because, like, in the Baha'i writings, they're very explicit that every individual really has, there's a requirement, like at a soul level, for us to explore the truth for ourselves. And also, like, asking questions is really encouraged. And that's another area where I think just the old kind of religious attitudes about just believing and certitude and not practicing those elements comes into play. So because there wasn't a space
for the exploration around questioning.
No.
Yeah. I love what you're saying, and I meet multiple people, and I've been on this path myself where I was curious.
Yes.
And curious child, curious teenager, still curious, very curious.
Excellent.
And that was not honored because everything was already laid out. So, what you're talking about, the certainty, the certitude, look no further, because it's here. It all is for you, and you don't need to look any further. And if you do look further, it shouldn't contradict this, because this is it. And while I've found that to be loosely true, it's the masculine or patriarchal, let's just say way, is black, white, right, wrong, good, bad. There's not a lot of room for a nuanced, or let's just say expansive, as you're talking, view on spirituality. So I love what you're saying about fear. How do we manage fear in a religious space? It's, just go pray more, or do these things, and you'll know what we know. You'll know exactly what we know, because we're telling you the truth. So to me, I see that now as spiritual ego, because so the ego is all about staying away from fear, not climbing into the shadow. Exactly what you're saying. What your therapist is saying about, like, there's no, we have a phrase, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt. No, you actually don't, because the fear is in the shadow. And if you don't climb into it and examine it and confront it, you're an ego. So let's stay out of ego, and let's open this up. So we can all explore together and have these healthy questions. When you used a phrase that I love, you had a knowing, or you called it a torrential inspiration that started to flow for you, which I love that phrasing. It's beautiful. In a practice that you were doing. That led you to know you needed to write this book, or take your writings, your poetry, and put it into a collated something to offer to the world. Torrential inspiration. That's yummy. So can you go back to that moment in time where you were like feeling that, and explain it to us? Because I think this happens a lot to us, and we don't honor it.
Cool.
The creativity starts to come in, and it's like, yes, you have this desire and you've done all this. So here's what we're going to do with this. Boom. Like a download.
Exactly. So there were really two stories that kind of represent this experience. They're both brief, but so originally with my poetry, I'd been writing for for years. And then, but I was very, very shy about sharing my work. And I was very afraid of rejection or that not even rejection, but that it wouldn't be so warmly embraced because I was so delicate that I really needed that like full on love of my expression. And, but I really wanted to share it. So one day I made, this was about 12 years ago. I was probably 20, and I created an experiment for myself in which I gave myself permission to write a bad poem every day for a month, and I committed to sharing that poem. And what this did was it allowed me to get out of some of the trappings of the binary of success and fail, and get outside of the paralysis of perfectionism. So I could just kind of have more range of motion with my expression. And so I did that, and I posted my first poem ever on Facebook, and it was warmly received, you know. And then the next day I showed up to do that again, and it was a completely profoundly different experience of poetry than I'd ever had before, because it wasn't efforting. It wasn't me, you know, putting out my effort and will to try to, you know, piece something together. I just, a poem completely came through me exactly as it was. And it was just given to me, and I just had to write it down as quickly as it would come through. And that was just amazing. And that's really been my process ever since. It's been, and that's another thing that's just really been a profoundly spiritual process, because
you're just allowing whatever needs to move through you,
exactly.
You.
So I try yeah. Sorry to cut you off.
No, I cut you off. So okay. I do that a lot.
We're just so excited. It's easy to jump in. So like I see my work now as trying to create myself as an environment to attract the muse. And by that, I just mean, trying to step outside of perfectionism and live in more of an experimental way, and try to keep my heart open and be truthful. And then poems just kind of come to me. So that's just been very, very special and cool, and really affirmed a connection with some energy that's beyond myself.
That's a beautiful creative practice to just give yourself one bad.
Yes.
Or maybe we reframe bad. We frame it to one messy or one, and we're going to get to messy because I want you to read your poem about that.
Cool.
Allowing yourself to just get out whatever's there, no matter how clean, profound or not. And, will you read to us the poem Wild Order? Because that definitely feeds into, and by the way, her book is called Susceptible to Light. And first of all, that's really a brilliant title, because you got to put yourself in the space to receive it. Be susceptible. Yeah. Wild Order.
Okay, here we go. Wild Order. Your controlling ways are actually quite crude compared to the way grace works. Look how the earth has let herself go, and somehow the flower is drawn. It turns out all your willpower, all that efforting, is astoundingly weak compared to the easeful way beauty shares herself through the form of hummingbird. Your perfectionism is quite a rough attempt compared to the wild order of the leaf. None of the small tendencies within you can begin to compete with the mastery that comes through everything surrendered. There's a bigger you waiting in there. Now slow down, pull your life over, and put all your intention on giving yourself over to that.
I'm just going to throw out some phrasing here that struck me.
Thank you.
The wild order of the leaf. Your perfectionism is a rough attempt. That's beautiful of that compared to that wild order of the leaf, and the perfection in, just we're all so engineered, wired, whatever you want to call it, for it's there. Like it's the controlling of that, what we think it needs to be, that takes us out of order. Mm-hmm. So wild order is the way. That's why I love that. And then the other part of it is the part about your willpower, all the efforting is astoundingly weak compared to the easeful way beauty shares herself through the form of hummingbird. So, you know, as we've been talking, and I've been kind of like, you know, talking about, you know, a faith transition and how that is wild disorder and order. And it's both, right? It's that paradox of like undoing and like, oh, if I just have this willpower, like I was saying, and we're both talking about sometimes spiritual communities. And I've seen this happen in yoga. I've people in the yoga path, yoga teacher training, like if I just, worked harder, if I just had more willpower, if I just mastered this thing, then the flow would happen. Then the grace would happen. Then I would. So it doesn't, I'm sure you're learning. I'm like 20 years older than you, but I'm sure you get like that. It doesn't work that way. No, it doesn't. So all these through your art form of poetry and all the creative essence that's flowing through you to write these things down and the downloads you're getting. What have you learned about God?
Oh, wow. What have I learned about God? Well, let's see. So another area that has really informed me, I guess, about kind of this essential light, which maybe is another word for God.
Sure.
Or affirms God when we can find that in ourselves, is my journey with hypnotherapy. And I've been working I'm not anymore. I'm just full-time poet. I love saying that. But before becoming a full-time poet, I've been working as a certified hypnotherapist for 10 years and have I've received myself hundreds of sessions. And in that process, really, an experience of really touching a place beyond limited conditioning and willpower, and really my consciousness or my awareness being able to sink down and connect with a place that is just very real. I mean, I've experienced it, I've embodied it, I've, you know, of this essential light, has just been such a profound process in just shaking everything up and allowing me to let go of some of the forms of thought about, I guess, God that I had.
So you talk about affirming that light, affirming that essential light this is what your poetry is kind of guiding people to for themselves, perhaps, but you're the vehicle or the mechanism or the vessel or whatever that it's coming through. So thank you. So that I didn't mean to paint you in a corner with like, what is God to you? But I'm finding that I need to start asking each of my guests this question, only because, especially for those who are going through some kind of a faith transition and they go into a season of bewilderment, maybe because everything was so delivered that they haven't landed that in their body of what God is in their body. They can read the things, right? Or listen to the speakers or, you know, do the practices. And then there's what you're saying, you're calling it essential light, and you have to feel that and know it inside of yourself. So thank you for bringing it back to what that is for you, which is the essential light.
And I think, you know, so also recently a big, massive life change for me has been just really being willing to experiment with God being truly all loving and unconditionally loving, and And I think very few of us really believe that about God. And that's where the fear comes in, and the perfectionism and the shame and the working so hard to try to please God. And,
yes,
and you know, I mean,
it's a rat race.
It's such a rat race. And honestly, if my deep self is honest, like I do not want a God unless that God is completely all embracing, unconditional, universally loving. Yeah. And when I realized that and started to practice that through, I don't know, I guess just being more open and honest and truthful, I swear, I mean, only good things have come from that.
Sure. Are you okay with reading your poem, Don't Compartmentalize God? Because it definitely feeds into... Yeah.
Absolutely. Let me just find it. Here we go. Don't compartmentalize God. And of course, as we stop compartmentalizing God, we stop compartmentalizing ourselves in many ways.
Sure.
And we come out of our own boxes. So it's very both and, which is very cool. So, okay. Don't compartmentalize God. Don't compartmentalize God. Do you think this permeating essence only stays in the clouds, or is snooty enough to only tolerate light? God does not live outside the mundane. She encircles and infuses every ordinary thing. She smears her grace liberally over every excess. God is bidirectional, not only up, but down and in, to the nectarous center of every wound. God does not disallow herself entrance into any darkness. She dives headlong into the profane. Do you imagine she abides any kind of caution tape? She kisses the heart of every misdeed. She drinks deep of your dark song. She undoes every binary and the very notion of wrongness. She discovers tenderness in the nucleus of every sin. If light has never hidden its face from any darkness, then what of its creator?
So rich.
Thank you.
I love the feminine reference.
Oh, yeah.
My favorite line, well, there's two. The nectarous center of every wound.
Yeah.
That one. And then on the heels of that, God does not disallow herself entrance into any darkness. Like she goes there, she dives in, she's in it. I used to think that the essential light that you're referring to and God, that was the only place that God was. Yes. If I'm in darkness, God's not here because he's only in light.
Right.
Until I understood the dark feminine goddess.
Ooh, yeah.
Which is not dark in the evil sense, but at still point creation, in nothingness, in the void. She meets you there. She's diving. She's helping you gestate, right?
Yes.
So I love that. Thank you for that. I want to kind of wrap up with, because you share a lot in your work, in your Facebook group. It's called Chelan Harkin Poetry, so people can find you there. But as it relates to, let's just say, what I found inspiring about you, and we have a mutual, you have a follower. I don't know if she's your friend, but she's my friend, Caroline Crockett Brock. She's like, you got to interview this lady, because she loves your work too. And I think what I really found inspiring about your path is that you just are putting it all out there. Like, it's like, hey, I'm not attached to how this is received. You're not in that perfectionistic space. I mean, I'm sure there's a part of you that is. We all have that natural ego attachment to how people are going to feel about it. But you're still just doing it, and you're not stopping, and you're self-proclaimed full-time poet. And so you're just doing it.
Yes.
And I think a lot of us would love to play in just the creativity and just the essence of our soul voice and path. But there's this like, I know I have this gift and I know I want to do it, but I have all these responsibilities and I have all this stuff that I need to do.
Yes.
So that's what I would like us to wrap with. And then I'm going to read, if you're okay, I want to read the other poem.
Perfect.
But I would love for you to just share with us the heart of like, hey, this is why I had to do this. And this is why I did this. And just give us that beautiful, like,
yes,
I'm staking my claim here in the world and I'm putting my gift expression out to the world.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, let's see. I am just, I'm built expressively. So there's just a natural quality where, if I don't express, I feel uncomfortable. So there's that.
Which is a rare quality. Well, actually, we all feel that way at our heart, but not everybody expresses. They just hold it in.
Yeah. Yeah. And then my family is expressive too. So that was somewhat normalized for me. So it's somewhat maybe more familiar than it is for some. But then, and I also want to say like, it can be easy to see people, I don't know, like doing their creative thing, 2 feet on their path and just think like, oh, they just have some kind of unique, remarkable, extra human confidence that I just don't have, and kind of do that separation thing. And oh my God, let me tell you, Cherie, like the vulnerability hangovers that I am constantly going through are very real. So I do have some kind of drive to get back up after that and dust off and get back to doing it again. But it's not. And it's rewarding and enlivening, but it's not that I am without, the doubt and the insecurity and the all of those vulnerabilities. Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that up, because there is this misconception that those who are producing or gifting and in their flow of that are somehow have less fear than anyone else.
Exactly. And it's not true.
It is not true.
No.
But I just want to honor that you're doing it anyway.
Thank you.
Because the mark of success is, and we all have a subjective definition of success.
Yeah.
Well, let's just say success in the traditional sense of production, we'll say, or producing something of value. So if you're successful people, the only qualifier of a successful person versus, let's just say, a non-successful person is because they both feel equal amounts of fear, but the successful person shows up anyway and they do it.
Ooh, bingo. Yes.
We all have ego. We all have fear. We all have shadows. So I want to end with this beautiful poem, Self-Care, that you created. By the way, again, this book is Susceptible to Light by Chelan Harkin. Self-care. Perhaps we need to give dimension to the meaning of self-care. Self-care can mean finally sinking into the dark pools of your shadows you've long avoided. Self-care can mean encountering the self-spun and inherited veils we've cloaked over our luminous spirit and inquiring, am I more than that? Self-care can mean at last entering the forest of your terrors, to realize the fears you've othered are all howling like night animals within you, and realizing the outside was always within brings new wisdom. Self-care can mean finally looking yourself in the eyes, into the black holes of your pupils, and their wild desire to annihilate every untruth you've held dear. And within all this, self-care can still mean we get to eat a little extra chocolate. I literally got chills when I was reading this, because I love women who are telling every other woman to dive into their shadows. I know it's not just for women you're saying this, right? But permission granted to find that wildness in the pupils and look at all these inherited veils.
Yes.
And say, am I more than that? Right? So it's shadow work, is self-care diving in. And that's why I love that one so much, because I was like, let's choose 3. Okay, 3. And I wanted to end on that one because, you, despite the shadows, you're showing up and you're gifting the world with your expression. And to your family's credit, they gave you the gift of expression and moving forward in that. And they gave you the foundation of this beautiful faith to find your own authentic path and voice. So thank you for today. Thank you
so much, Shuri. I genuinely enjoyed it.
Thanks to Chelan for that great discussion and a reminder of how important it is for us to climb inside and really integrate with our knowing so that we can express ourselves and be in our gifts, because that is where passion flows. That's where spirit flows. That's where we connect to those we're meant to find, our soul families on this earth, and just to feel the aliveness within our being. Not just for the sake of contribution, but just for the sake of creating, which is what I'm really learning right now. So thank you for tuning in this week. And remember, if you love our episodes, to find us on iTunes and leave a review. Super appreciate that. Helps us to get the word out to those who might be looking for these kinds of discussions to affirm and validate where they are on their own journeys. So you can find Chelan on Instagram, Chelan Harkin, as well as her Facebook group, Chelan Harkin Poetry. Have a lovely week, and we'll talk to you next time on Women Seeking Wholeness.